We'll move to item 8, the Recovery Coordination Office update, which is very topical. I'll call Matt to the front, I think. And whomever, Mace and Nick and Craig. Are you there, Craig?
He was there.
It's hard to miss. Okay, he's just gone out to make space for some water. That was a joke, actually. For those who don't know, here we are.
Good morning, everybody. Probably 4 parts to discuss with you here, and then obviously open for questions. I'll just give you a brief summary of kind of the key parts of the report that I'll take as read, the Recovery Coordination Office report. Then we want to give you a little bit more context around what making space for water looks like, a little more detail on how the process works, beyond just having identified some areas for you of where it would be applicable. Mace is going to talk then about timescale and next steps. There's lots of things in the report here that are more easily demonstrated graphically in terms of a timescale, so we're going to take you through that, and then obviously some time for questions. So there's 2 or 3 key things in the report that you will have noted, but I'll draw your attention to. The first is it talks about moving beyond our interim recovery plan, which is appended to the report, and it talks about the production of the full Tamaki Makaurau recovery plan and how that might work and the consultation process involved. The other key thing in there, of course, is making space for water, the flood risk reduction programme that we've brought to you before. So we've begun to take that to a little bit more detail for you now. The document does talk in some detail as to the public consultation that we intend to carry out now as we continue to produce more and more detail for the recovery plan for Auckland. There's also some discussion in the report as well about our contact with property owners over the last 2 or 3 weeks now. We will be at a stage now, we are at a stage now where we've contacted several thousand homeowners in Auckland to seek further information from them, and there's some feedback on that in this report as well, and should you want it, we can give you some more detail on exactly what that feedback has looked like and where we've got to. Generally speaking, the process for consultation now over the next few months concentrates on the most affected areas of the community, and they would be relatively obvious, one would think. Areas that have been affected badly by geotechnical events, areas that have been badly affected by flooding events are the places that, when we go to consultation more widely, we'll go there first. Both from a future resilience perspective and from the perspective of beginning to flesh out the recovery plan as well. Of course, before we do that, we've a plan to engage with the local boards and the local councillors in those areas first, so that you have a heads up on what we're going to do and when. Might just now talk in a bit more detail about making space for water and the concepts behind that, and just begin to flesh that out. Nick, do you want to do that?
Thanks. Kia ora, Mr. Chair and members. I'd just like to introduce the Blue-Green Network proposal. So we just want to give you a little bit more detail today, but as we've previously talked about, we've got some recent examples of infrastructure that's worked really well in the flood event, and I'm referring specifically to Te Aonga, also the Project Twin Streams, and also some of our joint programs with Kaingaora. So we really see this as an opportunity to grow more of these networks. And my simple way of looking at it is we're going to be building a whole lot of new linear parks. And those linear parks will be green most of the time, but probably for 0.1% of the time they'll be blue because they'll be temporary lakes. And that's basically the principle of how the blue-green network is designed to operate. Nick will talk you through some of the detail, but I just highlight the fact that there's still some issues to be worked around how this is going to be paid for and how the whole buyback thing is going to work, and we know that there's work in progress on that area at the moment because these programs from both the buyback perspective and an infrastructure development are not cheap, and we have to, in my view, is we just have to take advantage of this opportunity that nature's presented to us to turn a really bad thing into something good going forward for the community. Kia ora, and I'll hand over to Nick who will get into a bit more detail.
Kia ora, Your Worship, councillors. Just a couple of slides for you here. The first one is really just to unpack some of the thinking behind the blue-green network concept. I think the starting point for this is that we've very many houses dotted around the region in 1s and 2s and 3s, which are obviously part of discussions with the government around buyback. But the concept of the blue-green network is that there are clusters of those flood-affected properties where there is ability to extract more value for ratepayers of Auckland than just the value that accrues to buying back those properties, and that's really the concept that underpins these blue-green networks. Shortly, we'll show you the watercourses where we've identified clusters of these, but just conceptually, I just want to sort of take you through this, my conceptual stream here. So before, if we look at the image at the top, we have a stream just flowing from, with the arrows from right to left, and I have a whole lot of houses in the floodplain that are indicated as red, that flooded on the day. On the left of that image, the downstream, they're sitting in a natural floodplain, and the size of that floodplain is determined by the size of the watercourse. So the width of the stream and the height of the floodplains are very often in earlier development we've tend to impinge upon the stream, and so they're determining the size of the floodplain. The red rectangle you see up there is indicating that I've got an undersized culvert at the top above those properties, and that undersized culvert in turn is causing the properties upstream of that to be at flood risk. And so as it stands, without the ability to retreat on any of this, there's very little we can do because we don't own the property to widen the stream lower down. And we actually can't release the culvert further up to get the upstream properties out of risk because we will flood the downstream properties more. And that's fundamentally the issue we strike in many, many streams across Auckland. And so the concept behind the blue-green network is you'll see that now the stream side properties have been removed on one side of the stream to make way for a new linear park. That in turn enables us to do the stream widening and the floodplain lowering that we need to do. And because we've got those lower houses out of risk, it also enables us to do the culvert upgrade we need to do upstream to get those properties out of risk. And so it's a concept where by buying the most at-risk properties, we can leverage a flood risk reduction to within the catchment more generally. And that's the fundamental concept behind blue-green networks. Some of the ones we've identified are not along streams per se. They're more, if they're not in a watercourse, they may be amenable to being parks that can be flooded to reduce the general flood risk. So that is the concept.
Just so it's a pretty good little drawing to explain it with, I'd say, you know, that make use of that, particularly, you know, I get a lot of questions about what the hell it's out on about. I'll find that a very good one to talk to, so I wouldn't mind a copy of that either. Thanks very much.
Correct, Your Worship. And so we have identified to date clusters on 12 significant watercourses, or significant clusters within 12 watercourses, 12 awa. And so this is not necessarily the be-all and end-all. We're aware of other significant clusters, so we're not by any means saying that this will be the full extent, but these are the ones we think are most likely to have the ability to do everything I've talked to today. So broadly they are the Waido, the Kumu River around Kumu Township, the Waimoko, Swanson streams, the Opanuku, Porter Stream in Glen Eden, the Faux Stream around Blockhouse Bay, Te Awanga, where we've already done previous work. Meola and Epsom areas, not alongside watercourses, but significant clusters of properties. Also Cox's Creek and Grey Lynn, Te Ararata and Haranea in Mangere, and finally Whangapuri in Pukekohe. And those are the, if you like, the 12 awa that we're focusing on currently, and clearly we're taking an interest in seeing the response to the to a categorisation and buyback scheme in those catchments. And I will leave it there.
Your Worship and members, just a really quick update about next steps and what's on the timeline. So we have released, and it's in your with your report today, the interim recovery plan, which is guiding the Recovery Office. Community engagement, just on 7,400 communications have gone out to the affected property owners, those in high risk areas and those that have significant damage to their properties. We've had, interestingly, quite a large number of those are email contacts. The vast majority are email contacts where people have received those communications. We've had 440 responses back so far, and the website that is hosting those smart forms has had over 7,000 hits as well, and views of the pages and information. So there has been good engagement over a very short period of time, sitting alongside some other direct community engagement. In July, we will have a greater presence in response to those communications out in those highly affected priority communities, sitting alongside insurance companies, alongside the temporary accommodation service. I would say that a lot of our feedback has been for social need and housing need, as well as providing information on property damage. Governing body consideration of decision for making space for water, and in the consideration of this year and any funding with central government will also come to you in July. That will be around infrastructure and the consideration of the government's proposal around buyouts of properties. And then in August, community consultation on the recovery plan, which will outline those initiatives that respond to the extreme weather events we've had in 2023. And significantly, as you've heard from Nick and Craig, the Making Space for Water program, how we respond to the land stability program, and significantly the infrastructure program. So we've been working alongside the key, typically horizontal infrastructure, public sector owners, and identified over $2.5 billion of works that are required in Tamaki Makaurau for infrastructure repair. That's not resilience, it will have a resilience component. So there's a significant work stream in that area that we'll be able to update you on. And then in August, late August through September, the geotechnical land stability work comes back in from the West Coast, and we will be expecting more geotechnical land stability assessments from those other areas affected by slips and the like across regions, across the region, other properties. And then the consideration and adoption, publication of the recovery plan in September, acknowledging that that will have quite a long tail on it in terms of transfer from the Recovery Office into BAU functions for Auckland Council Group and the other public sector agencies as well. So there is a long program of work. So Thanks very much, Your Worship. Thanks, members.
Is that it? Okay. That was an excellent presentation, thank you. And now, I've got a number of people wanting to ask questions, but before you do that, just remember that with your questions that we will be discussing more in the confidential section, stuff about the voluntary buybacks. So if it's about that, just hold off for later, because that relates to commercially sensitive matters. And I've got something to say about that later on. I think it's important to note there's a lot of technical work to be done, and the government has said they want the process completed in 12 months. The voluntary buyback one, they wanted to have it in the next 10 days. Well, that's not going to happen. I'm very keen to see progress on making space for water to work. But before moving to questions, I'll have a mover and a seconder for this. Stuart. And, yeah, I've got, calm down, please. The seconder is the deputy. The Deputy Mayor had a suggestion around asking staff to investigate the assistance that could be available for ratepayers who cannot live in their properties. Do you want to speak to that now, Deputy Mayor, before I go into the formal questions section?
I'll ask a couple of questions and then I will get to that, if that's all right, from a process perspective. So my first question, thanks, Your Worship, Matt. First of all, thanks to you and the team. Great job, really, really great job. My first question relates to paragraphs 13 and 14 in the report. Given that many of our people in the community have been living and breathing, you know, all the trouble from January 27, why is it necessary to do further public engagement with them? Don't we know all the information already?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. There's probably two parts to that question. There's a technical part, which I'll start with. Particularly around the Making Space for Water programme, it's a really high-touch property-by-property engagement that's needed to understand that programme. You get into levels of detail around individual home floor levels, for example, and 3 homes next to each other in the same street may be treated completely differently depending on when they were built and how they were built and what their subsequent floor levels are. So there's a really detailed, high-touch engagement still needed that we haven't far from completed yet. More broadly, if you think about the programmes themselves, the Making Space for Water programme, they're significant, as I think you can probably tell from the presentation that the team's given. And something of that significance, plus the recovery plan itself, is of considerable significance. We need to consult more widely on those with the public. We can't just impose those things without consultation.
That's just clarification. I think that a lot of people say, why are you coming back? Surely you know it already. Okay, get that. My second question is on paragraph 29, and Mace, you sort of alluded to it, but in the report it says that we're sending letters out to flood and cyclone affected property owners, noting that many of them aren't there. Well, how much confidence do we have that those letters are actually getting to the householders if they're not actually in their homes?
Yeah, thank you. So as Mace said, the vast majority of communication has been by email. So in that regard, we've been fortunate, for want of a better word, that we haven't had to rely on post. Our public media engagement is focused on, and will continue to focus on, making people aware that if they haven't had a letter or an email, they can still contact us and the outcome will be the same. And we see that from the hits on the website, the enormous amount of hits that we've had on the website, which will take homeowners to the same place should they wish to go there, rather than having had a letter or an email. And probably important to say, there's no end date for this in mind. If somebody hasn't contacted us by, next Friday, that doesn't preclude them. It's an ongoing process, so there's plenty of time.
And my last question, which I've spoken to you about, but just for public, for public awareness. You've lived and breathed about out, especially in the West, a lot lately. Have you had any approaches for rates relief or hardship assistance support, noting that we have successfully given out all those who have applied for Q3 and 4 of this financial year. Have you had any letters or approaches or concerns from residents affected?
Yes is the short answer to that. Considerable approaches and correspondence. Certainly considerable approaches. At the Muriwai public meeting that we attended last week, the feedback was overwhelmingly about the need for more assistance, be it assistance from banks, assistance from insurers, assistance from TAS, and rates relief. That overwhelmingly was the message from the residents of Muriwai last week, verbally, with some members of the community in tears when they were having those conversations with us. And yes, we've got written correspondence now asking for consideration of rates relief from certainly from one community group that I know of.
Thank you. And so that, Sandra, I wonder if you could just put up the note. Councillors, just for your information, I've talked to both Finance and Matt about this. It's just really noting that, you know, many Aucklanders are still severely impacted by what has happened. We gave successfully as I mentioned, a return for those who had hardship grants in Q3 or 4, but that still remains. We know that Hastings District and Thames Coromandel acted quickly to provide assistance. And so this doesn't commit us to anything. This just asks staff to come back and advise what would be available to us to continue that assistance till we land the place where we're getting to on the government buyback scheme. So to that end, Matt, can I understand that you're happy with the amendment?
I guess I'm getting slightly out of my depth here in what's sounding like a political conversation. From a personal perspective, based on what I saw in Muriwai, I think it would be a sensible suggestion.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if you'd like to, can't remember who, if I moved it, who was the seconder?
Moved by Sharon Stewart.
Oh, okay, Sharon, I'm happy to second it then. Hold on, I've just got, hold the line, caller. Let me just change.
It appears the mover and seconder are happy to include B. Okay, on that basis, I'm going to open up for questions, and the first question is from Councillor Ferry, please. Councillor Ferry,
Thank
you up
you.
there?
Yep, can you hear me?
I can hear you clear, thank you.
Great, thanks very much. So I really appreciate this work and, you know, acknowledging that it's a big undertaking. At our last governing body meeting back on, I think it was the 23rd of May, I asked about, and not for the first time, there being a regional online briefing, sharing this information, what we're doing, what some of the high level thinking is. At the time, we didn't put it in as a resolution because the discussion with staff was that, yes, that would happen and it didn't need to be a resolution. But it still hasn't happened. And it's getting to a point of being quite frustrating. I understand that there's the targeted engagement happening with the directly impacted red and yellow stickered people. However, there's a whole lot of other people out there who really want to understand what council is doing and who may not have got an RBA. And I'm really worried that we're not doing as much comms in this space as we could be. So what's the plan there? Putting aside the very high touch, as you pointed out, direct conversations with affected property owners, what's the regional comms strategy? And when is that online briefing going to happen? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Potentially we could share with you our communications strategy. The Recovery Office for the things that you've talked about and many other things has a formal communication strategy that we work to. I appreciate and acknowledge that there can never be enough communication with enough people and frequently enough in these situations. That said, there is considerable communication going on, local board forums, iwi chair forums, and so on and so forth. But take your point that we haven't organised the session that you referred to, and I'll see to it that it's in the calendar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. I think Councillor Williamson's just sending a PowerPoint to Sandra. If you could put something up there. I have got some questions. Okay, so what the question is, with your presentation, I noticed that you haven't included Howick, Cockle Bay, Freiburg, Angelo catchment, and these are some catchments that I've been sort of banging on for a long, long time ago, but the presentation we're going to show you in a few minutes, and I know that the Mayor actually has seen this site down at Freiburg with one of the last floods we had, the property on Freiburg that we'll see the picture of shortly, it flooded it right into the garage once again. But one of I see point 21, you've got many parts of council have responsibilities that influence how we manage floods and build community resilience. One of the things that I've been asking for a long, long time, and I know a number of the councillors around here, Councillor Watson and Walker, have also been out to have a look. One of the things that I've been asking is, in this picture you'll see, just across the road where we've had this flooding, one of the properties I've been asking, can we get the property owners to clean up and clear all the bamboo, because the culvert's really, the pipe's really, really small, and that's what's causing a lot of the problems, and it has been for a very long time. Anyway, so it's up there now, so can we just move, I'm not sure which one's going to come up first, so Sandra, can you just move to another slide? And yeah, if you see just across the road from where all the flooding's happening, where the letterbox is, there's, I think it's a big pahutakawa tree, and a whole lot of bamboo. Well, that property there, that is one of the things, that's one part that's really causing most of the issues with clogging up the stream. Can we make sure that we, can we add Howick, Pakaringa, Cockle Bay into the work we're doing, please?
I can go a step further than that, Councillor Stewart. You must be reading my mind, because I'm actually drafting an email to you and Councillor Williamson this morning. We actually have a project to deal with this risk, which we're currently just completing the business case at the moment, and then we'll go into detailed design, and it'll become part of our program, and we're looking to kick it off in physical works in 2024. So, but it doesn't require in order to execute a solution that works for this community, it doesn't require any property buyback. So we're able to do that with a new infrastructure investment, which is why it's not part of the Making Space for Water program, because we don't need to make any more space. We can just treat this as a BAU project that is done by Healthy Waters on a regular basis. Kia ora.
Yeah. Could you just flick through the next three so you can just see how bad it is? Neighbours have actually had to, the people were away, neighbours had to actually break into the house to release the water, so it is quite serious. So it's not just out west, it's happening everywhere, and it's just that, the last couple of rainfalls have been out west, but we get it out our way too. Thank you.
Yeah, so just so everyone's aware, this was a consequence of the localised high rainfall that occurred in Howick on the 9th of May. This isn't in relation to any of the January or February events. This is in relation to the 9th of May, and this is, unfortunately, when we get local storms, this is exactly what we thought would happen, which is why we've got this as a priority project to fix. Kia ora.
Good response. Thanks very much for that question, which was, it is being dealt with, and it doesn't need to be part of the green, blue-green. So good response from everybody there. Councillor Henderson, please.
Thank you. Just regarding linear parks, and just prefacing it by saying what a fantastic job you guys are doing. So thank you very much for all of this work on the Blue-Green Network, and certainly very much needed in these areas identified in Waitakere and across the city. How are we going to involve local boards in this kind of conversation? And I've got a bit of a follow-up, but what do you guys think about that?
Well, we've got local board workshops scheduled over the next month with all of the relevant local boards that have proposed blue-green projects in the area. We really see the local boards and the local community taking a lead in all of this work, because they need to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, because they are the communities that are going to be obviously the major, well, they will become major beneficiaries of the outcome, so they need to own it with us, and so we see this as being very much a partnership model we need to adopt.
Yeah, 100% agree. Thank you for that. Just my follow-up is that if we're looking at linear park stuff, which obviously needs to soak water, what are we doing in terms of a transport space? Could we look at building shared paths through these linear parks, and do we have the financial flexibility to do that?
Oh, look, if we're going to go to all the trouble to build a new park, a park's only a successful park if it's got all of the civic amenity that a park should have. So walkways, cycleways, doing the appropriate planting programs, playgrounds where they're appropriate, all of that. To my mind, that's part of building a new park.
I couldn't have put it better myself.
Otherwise, we don't get the return on investment if we it becomes part of a community asset, and as we know, some of those communities will benefit from these additional assets, and it'll also help the community facilities team with potentially what some of their forecast program would have needed to be to grow these areas anyway. So I see this as being a real win-win.
Correct. Fantastic chance for transport links. Thanks, Mayor.
Good question, good answers. Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Sure. Just have a question, and it follows on from Councillor Ferry and Councillor Stewart, and goes like this. Given that there's severe flooding that has occurred in a lot of areas, and I'm talking about areas that are outside the blue-green network, and not just homes, but also businesses that are being hit once and hit again. And examples, for example, are Browns Bay, Mairangi Bay. There are a number of locations in the Albany ward that have been severely hit. And a high level of anxiety whenever there's a rain event. Now, what are your communications with these various areas around Auckland, so that they know that there is some engagement and there are things that are going to be happening?
Thanks, Councillor. I think we've touched upon some of this earlier in the conversation, but I can expand a bit and perhaps reiterate. So we've talked about you know the conversations in the immediately impacted areas from the events of earlier this year, and that has to be initially where we focus our efforts from a recovery office perspective, the areas that have been specifically impacted. But of course there is a broader, longer term view, and we're beginning now to turn our minds to that broader, longer term view. You know the conversation about Howick and Cockle Bay and Pakaranga that we've just had, areas that weren't necessarily affected by the events but are at future risk should there be other different types of events. And also part of the answer again is around our website, which is experiencing extremely high rates of traffic, so that there is information available for Aucklanders, and they are finding it on that website that I would urge people to look at.
Perhaps just a follow-up. Councillor Walker, through you, Your Worship, there will be targeted engagement around the recovery plan for local recovery plans, where the community will have opportunities, as Craig mentioned, to feed into what placemaking looks like, but also what's going on in terms of flood mitigation and flood management, and including awareness.
So what is the timing on that? Because you know it's some time now since these flood events, and there are heightened areas of concern.
So timing was on the timeline after September and that for that general consultation, but for Hibiscus and Bays and Takapuna, or Devonport Takapuna local board areas, there's been over 900 communications gone out to those targeted properties to provide assurance. So it's good engagement and understanding there.
The other related question is whether are works occurring that are at odds with what we're doing. For example, there are instances where you've got raised tables around shopping centres that will certainly impede overland flow paths and generate far worse flooding of businesses, and these sorts of things are happening as we speak. So I don't know what the mechanisms are for dealing with these things, but I can tell you people in communities and businesses are very frustrated.
We've been frustrated as well around our ability to manage overland flow paths from a compliance perspective. So it's actually been addressed as part of the water reform legislation, giving the entity the ability to actually manage overland flow paths. Because to be honest, if we're looking at a stormwater network, the overland flow path is actually a critical part of the network. And it structures within, as you quite rightly say, it structures within overland flow paths that actually cause unintended flooding consequences. So we have to treat them as any other asset and inspect them, and if the overland flow paths are blocked, notice needs to be served on the landowners to remove those blockages, because they do need to be treated as assets the same as a stream or a pipe. Kia ora.
Okay, good question, good answer again. Thank you. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you. Just, you know, we seem to be in a step change of attitude here where we're approaching our water and our riparian areas in a different manner. So, you know, one of the problems out there that I hear is people are scared to go into their creek, they're scared to go into their riparian area, they've been told you can't do this because of rules, etc. And a lot of our waterways, our private and public, have got SEAs over them. So what I'm asking, when you talk about these new policies going forward, is there a place here to remove the old policies from behind us so that we don't end up all tied up and constricted by a millstone around our neck of stuff that we have to consider but is old and no longer necessary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that's something certainly the recovery plan can look at in terms of what, you know, how do you cater for a changing climate and what the policy settings are so that enables a sensible approach.
But what I'm worried about is a lamination of policy on top of policy on top of policy when a whole bunch of the old ones could be slipped out.
Understand.
Thank you. The other question is if we could go back to that schematic just of the one the Mayor liked. What worries me about that is it's not showing the whole network. It doesn't show the sea where the water wants to go. And we're talking about a lake type situation. And so, based on a couple of other people's comments, how do you expect those to empty, soak away or evaporate away?
Councillor Turner, apologies for my simplistic schematic. Most definitely the ocean is on the left-hand side of the picture. Obviously we need to do our works from downstream to upstream because if we don't, we're going to run into problems. And so that's why the properties in the downstream, at flood risk in the downstream, are so critical, because they're the ones that are constraining doing further works in the upstream to lower flood risk.
Good, thank you. I'm glad that, you know, that you've put that clear, because that's what the people are worried about. You show the red block there where it's a constricted drain, etc. There are constrictions all the way down the networks, and we have to face all of them. And the last question was, has everybody who's got a sticker of any sort been contacted in writing?
Yes, Councillor Turner, there has been a vast majority have been contacted by their case managers and they will have had a notice in terms of their placard status. We are seeing a reduction in placard status now between the different categories, And then we've used also our communications most recently for those high impacted properties. We're up to the end of the yellow placards for those properties, and we will also communicate to the whites, noting that's next week, noting that those placards have now expired. They're more than 21 days old. And that goes across the 9th of May, the tornado event, and the earlier Cyclone Gabrielle and Auckland Anniversary Weekend floods.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I think that little concept thing is just to explain the actual localised heart of a blue-green network rather than the entire catchment, which I'm reliant on these people do understand where it's going. And so I still find that very useful. But we'll put a note there that it will go into the sea for those people who don't get that. But it was actually going to your house originally, Councillor, but we've decided to go to the sea. Councillor Darby will elucidate us further.
Thanks, Nick. I'm still quietly chuckling as to your reply to as to where the ocean is. So thank you, Nick. I'll test you next time on that, though. And Nick, just on the blue-green network work, of course, that needs to be viewed in the context of, the urban Auckland roading network as well. I've mentioned this to you before. Where are you and the team up to with Auckland Transport and how they are updating their transport design manual and the roads and streets framework? Because as you know, without that, it's a dislocated response, potentially. First question.
Yeah, Councillor Darby, I take your point. We need good communication with Auckland Transport and good alignment around all of these projects. The current process, I guess, is a little extraordinary to the day-to-day. So, for example, the culvert upgrades that we're indicating as part of these, part of this program, is very much focused on our analysis of the blue-green networks, sort of outside of the usual day-to-day with Auckland Transport. So we've, within the context of what we sort of shaped up at the moment, they're very much based on our understanding of the network models and where we need to release them. Obviously, as you sort of alluded to, these are more complex beasts than of my nice schematic up here. Some of these all have subtly different business cases. They all have different abilities to release properties from flood risk. So we sort of need to work our way through those, which we'll get a better steer on once we understand the degree to which people want to be out of there. And I think once we get to that point, it's important that we're with Auckland Transport that we're aligned in terms of their strategy and ours.
Yeah, look, I won't labour the point now, but look, I'm aware that they might be sort of moving to review those two documents. Look, I do know that they've got a like-for-like replacement policy, so if they come across a 5 metre wide footpath, there's only really demand for a good quality 3 metre footpath, they'll keep sealing it. They won't be greening it. So, we do this fine work, but they carry on.
So our agreement with AT says that if we've got a culvert of size X and we want to upgrade it to X plus, Healthy Waters pays for the differential. So in the case of the culvert that Nick's got there, that would be funded by the Making Space for Water program, not a cost on AT to deliver the outcome.
Yeah, and I guess I'm talking much wider than that. I'm talking about blue-green streetscapes. That's my second question, Matt, to you. Matt, you've got your feet under the desk now and you've got a lot of experience in this area. And you've got your coordination office in place, teams building. I guess, and there's a lot of expectation, a lot of public expectation. There's people that are desperate to know what is happening and when are they going to be contacted, etc. And I note from the report some communication has started in earnest, and I acknowledge that. I guess, Matt, one of the really fundamental questions for me is, now that you've got your feet under the desk and you're building your office, are you confident, mindful of the expectation and the enormity, the growing work streams here, because this is not getting smaller, this is only getting bigger, as as you reveal things. Are you confident that your office is financially resourced and skills resourced to do the work to the political expectation and the community expectation, and to your expectation as somebody who's got considerable experience in this area? I guess I'm wanting a really candid reply there, because I know that if we don't finance you, if we don't give you the appropriate budgets, and then things don't turn up as expected, you know, we're ultimately responsible. Have you got any feedback on that area, Matt?
Yeah, sure, Councillor. I'm extremely fortunate to have inherited some extremely good foundations and building blocks. Phil, before me, working with Mace, had already gone a significant way down thinking what was needed and what the structure should look like, and where to quickly get resources from the organisation. So I'm fortunate that those building blocks exist. I've got considerable support from the ELT, the other members of the executive. Numerous times a week we have stand-ups. We've got one this afternoon just to talk specifically about recovery and the needs of the recovery office, and how the ELT can support. I've got similar support from the Mayor's office, the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and their chief advisors, or chiefs of staff I should say, and I talk regularly, multiple times every week, and where I'm asked if I need anything, what do I need, can they help me get stuff. Financially, we were given a fairly blank piece of paper to try and establish what we needed next year and articulate what we needed, which has been put into the budget. So there were no constraints placed upon that. We were asked what we needed to make this right for Aucklanders as best as we could, and that's what we've asked for, and that's what you've given us in next year's budget.
That interim budget, that will sustain you, or do you want to voice any concern about the limit of that at the moment?
No, I don't want to voice any concern right now, other than to say that it's a really, really fluid situation. Right now I haven't got any concern, but that's not to say that I wouldn't come back to you for a conversation in 3, 6, 9 months from now. I just can't predict the fluidity of the situation.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. Was that a call to sell more shares, was it? No. Councillor Leone.
Kia ora, thank you for the presentation. My question's just around the businesses that have been impacted, and whether you're putting together some data, because for example, Portage Road in my ward, I know that there's a number of businesses where the stream is widening and they're very concerned about obviously the future of their business. So I just want to see, how are you collating data for the businesses that will be affected in the future?
Yes, we are, Councillor, and I've been out to see some of those businesses with Craig and the Deputy Mayor in recent weeks, and understand the challenges that they face. Their situation and our support of them is different to the situation of residential homes and their support. And as yet, I couldn't talk to what that will look like, but certainly we're aware of businesses that have been impacted, and we're talking with them.
Okay, and my second question is just around, I think as I've brought up before, your relationship or how mana whenua are being implemented into the plan. So can you just confirm that there, because I just couldn't see that in the presentation.
Kia ora, Councillor. Yes, so we have, in terms of the strands or programs we've got in place, a Māori Participation and Partnership Program, and that we've been working with the iwi chairs and with individual iwi as well around how we're able to engage them in the future planning, but also direct responses where that's necessary, whether it's marae, whether it's the impact on cultural sites, the impact on forests, but engaging directly with mana whenua.
Are we going through our iwi forum here? Because I know that not all of the iwi in Tamaki Makaurau are signed up to the iwi chairs forum.
Yeah, certainly no limitation, so yes, we are reaching out broadly to the 19 iwi.
Okay, ka pai.
Thank you. Councillor Philippina, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, morena koutou, gentlemen. Ngā mihi ki a koe mō tō mahi. Thank you for the work around this. My first part is the blue-green network concept and the 12 areas that you've currently identified. And this is with my regional hat on. How many of those 12 areas have developments from kāinga ora?
The most significant developments in there would be in the Te Ararata stream in Mangere, also the Haranea, also Te Awanga. There are KO land holdings scattered throughout the blue-green networks. So in fact, there are many hundred properties of KOs involved in there too, but they would be the concentrations.
Good point. Sorry, Matt.
Councillor, and we're all across that with kāinga ora at any level you could think of, from my level right down to individual stormwater planning and design to discuss how that interaction works with them.
Can you share how the kōrero is going on with kāinga ora? I know there was some amounts that were mentioned when I spoke to the local board at the business meeting last night. I'm not going to mention that just in case it's confidential, but there was some values and massive mention of monies that they were going to put in. How are the negotiations with kāinga ora around what their contribution will be around those houses or developments, please?
I couldn't speak to commercial negotiations with kāinga ora. What I'm saying is that we're talking with them from a practical perspective about the homes that are affected and where they are, timescales. To some degree, the future streetscape that Councillor Darby talked about is a conversation with kāinga ora as well, particularly where they've got dozens and dozens of homes in these blue-green networks. And also another example of collaboration with them would be the letters to their tenants. So that tenants obviously live in homes that have been affected. So they're helping us with that communication rather than us communicate directly with tenants. We've communicated with kāinga ora. And on our behalf, they're having the resident communications about the potential effects on the homes that they live in.
And through you, Chair, I've just got only the one more partai, but I do reserve my right to speak. And if you could put me on the list, Sandra, that'll be great. The last part I have is around your memo that you sent and also subsequent email on the 13th of June. And it mentioned around those that are not insured. Has any work been done with all the CDCs that were set up during the anniversary floods? For example, I know in some of the CDCs there were MB had attended to talk to the community come in at the Mangere one. Also we had Tower, some of the other insurance companies. And has anybody contacted them to get at least the level of how many people in our communities across Tamaki Makaurau that weren't insured? Because so I just clarify why I've asked, because based on that email you sent, it was also those that weren't insured because they're the ones that are actually struggling across Tamaki Makaurau. And I just want to make sure that we've done enough to get an indication as to how many weren't insured. And I just want to make sure that that gets done with the CDCs that were set up and the insurance companies that were in attendance. Kia ora.
It's that group of uninsured homeowners is a really important and difficult one to identify, as you've rightly noted, Councillor. So whilst we've are beginning to gather really good data from the insurers, and the placards give us really good data and so on, it's a group that we're really struggling to identify, the one that you've just asked about. What I can tell you is that particularly in Mangere, we've got some resource going in there next week to start working directly in the community and having those conversations with yourself and anybody you can point us to help us understand that group. It's about the only way we can do it is to get into the community, to have the conversations with the right people, and go home to home and try and establish the nature of that group.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hills, please.
Thanks, Mayor, and I have a couple of questions. One was going to be around Mana Whenua, so that's great to know that we'll be deeply involved, because in Northcote with Te Ara Awataha, that's been a fantastic exercise there with similar projects. My question is, and I know we're going to talk about Category 3s more in the confidential, but I think it's important to talk about what we can talk about in public. There are obviously going to be some crossover, I imagine, so some Category 3s will also be homes we need for the blue-green projects, and how will those two things weave together? Will we be looking to buy all the homes early, because these projects are going to take a long time?
Councillor Hills, I'll take that one. I think I alluded to the fact that all of these blue-green networks have very different business cases. And I honestly think we are going to need to understand the extent of to which the public want to buy into any buyout, if you will, because I think until we understand who voluntarily wants to go in these catchments, we need to just be careful about making any decisions about the remaining properties. Clearly, if we don't get given any other levers by government, presumably any remaining properties would have to be under the Public Works Act, which is how Twin Streams was run a few years back. And so obviously those are all concerns that we're very aware of, and so we'll be continuing to refine this once we understand the extent of Category 3s and those who want to go.
Thank you. Will the okay, I was going to ask about compulsory, but with the process, and I want to acknowledge Healthy Waters for coming out to community and helping us with those difficult conversations. I guess from my sense of it, and it's I guess all of you, how do we tell, where is the point that we stop leaving people in limbo, especially when we know they're not, there's a kind of middle ground where we know that if you're just being flooded, obviously it's horrendous, but it's probably not going to fit the criteria for council government buyout or the blue-green network. So as I understand it, with the billions it's going to cost us anyway, we are only going to be buying where it is extremely unsafe or repetitive. But what people experience on the 27th, my understanding, a lot of people maybe think they're affected, but actually we like, at what point are we sadly ripping off that Band-Aid? Because it's pretty horrible for people, but we kind of need to tell them that they need to engage their insurance, and we'll use some tools to...
Probably Council Hills will come out in a bit more clearly when we have our discussion in confidential about where we are with the voluntary buyout solution with the government, which we are linking in with the blue-green until we quite know what the relationship is between us and the government with funding. I don't think we can really answer that clearly just yet. So if we can just park that and raise it again later in the day, I think it'd be quite helpful. If that's all right. I'm not trying to stop you raising questions.
No, thank you, Chair. I just think, people are getting, are wanting to know, and I think there's probably a bigger sector of people that we're going to have that hard conversation with sooner. Will there be some way, and I know we discussed it in the Waido Valley with some businesses, some way for those people who are definitely not in, a suite of tools or ways we can make things easier to help them become more resilient as an individual property owner when there may be an expectation that we can, and I know the Mayor's been clear about that, will at the same time we have these hard conversations, could there be a toolbox or these are some great designs or we will help consent this really quickly for you to protect yourself through your own private means, just so it's sort of not several processes we have to take people through?
Councillor Hills, I think it is important to set expectations around any buyback. The number of properties that we had that flooded, habitable floor flooding in these events was in the many, many thousands. And the numbers we're talking about of high risk, high hazard are the absolute fraction of those. And so, yes, for the vast majority of people, it will not be about the fact that they're category 3. It will be about other levers that we need to pull around resilience and giving them information. Now, clearly, getting to thousands of property owners around the region with that is quite a task. I think probably fair to say that we feel the need to give property owners who have some expectation of category 3 that understanding as soon as possible. So we, in managing our way through that, we will be actively trying to triage stuff as rapidly as possible, so that we're not, we're not dealing with minutiae of stuff that's unlikely to be category 3. And I think once we feel like we're on top of that that category 3 side of things, our focus will start to turn to some of those other category 2 properties that still need to be still need advice.
Okay, thank you. And last question, and it's I guess to more Councillor Darby's question and the way we change everything quickly. And I know that we're getting some great ideas and activities through the PEP committee as well. But how do we get the change or change of design as a whole of council body on things that are already happening, such as road rehabilitations or projects that are going on? We do it in a random sense, sort of. I can name some great projects around the city that we've already done, but it's not sort of taken on as everyone's thinking that way. How do we get that change quick, so we're not spending millions, hundreds of millions of dollars this year on great new projects that don't include green infrastructure by intention? Like, how do we make sure we talk about all the great new developments that have happened with all these rain gardens and things? How do we get that happening automatically without years of policy change?
It's true, you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Councillor Hills. We have been working directly with particularly those horizontal infrastructure owners, and identifying projects that can be clustered where one asset owner takes the lead and coordinates that function, including really looking at what are, as Councillor Darby said, how do you change the design manuals to actually take account of a changing climate environment, who takes the lead, how do we get a coordinated view from those asset owners by location, so that we're not building a road one day and digging it up the next day, in simple terms, and we are applying those new innovations so that we ensure that there's a better outcome in terms of flooding, for example, on overland flow paths, so that we work through. We've been doing that work with Infrastructure New Zealand and Te Wahanga, and that coordination of work in terms of also a forward works view of using that as the way of coordinating and aggregating those projects.
Councillor Hills, could we have Councillor Sayers, please?
Thank you, Worship. Two questions. One's around mangroves, and the other question's around the amendment, or the addition to the recommendations there. So the first one's just trying to understand, with mangroves growing at the end of water streams, coming out into our harbours particularly, and they seem to be, flourishing quite well with the nutrients and things that are down there. Is that part of this? Does that fall into scope of the work that you're doing in terms of it potentially being a hindrance to, water exiting our streams and rivers? It's something that's quite topical in community. People love them or hate them, but I just would like to try and understand: is it in scope, and if so, to what degree? Yeah.
Councillor Sayers, I think the answer to that is it's in scope if it causes properties to flood.
Yeah.
as far as we're concerned. We don't like to get involved in messing with the coastal environment if we don't have to. It can be very expensive, and you know, mangrove removal is a bit of a Sisyphean task. Remove it, and we know they're going to come back. So it's not something we undertake lightly. There are examples in some of the awa that I've been talking about where there may actually be some sort of, you know, culvert upgrades required, right, and clearances right down at that coastal level. But it'll be case by case, because we don't like to do it as just a given.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you for the answer. And that one's just around the recommendation. It's just for clarity to what we're actually asking through the wording there, particularly at the end there. And the officer raised this in their presentation, that the tears that are happening out there with the community, and people that are actually affected by that, it's quite. I just need to kind of overemphasise and reinforce the effect that this has had on people out there. That really, every day they're out waking up in the morning trying to get their lives back together. And Auckland councils, we weren't quick out of the blocks. We're doing our best that we can now. However, you know, people expected that around their rates, if Auckland Council had any kind of heart, using their words, they would have automatically put the rates relief in. They wouldn't be paying rates on somewhere that they couldn't live. And that hurt is still out there. So I just want to make sure, in terms of when we're asking a question like to seek advice, to include information on available rates release mechanism, from the community's point of view, they probably don't see that as action. Like they just want Auckland Council to do as much as they can, but as quickly as they can. So my questions around, for my clarification, is to see, you know, I thought we understood what rates mechanisms there are out there, and I could be wrong. There may be others that we're trying to seek through this, but I think they actually want the rates relief activated. You know, they just want it to happen, and they probably expected it to happen automatically. So I just want to be quite clear about how is this recommendation helping that person or that family that wants rate relief from Auckland Council to get it as quickly as possible. They expect it to be in like yesterday, right?
I think in response to it, it started off as a well-intentioned thing from the Deputy Mayor asking that they could use some of this money for that, but the Chief Financial Officer pointed out that that's a revenue item and it has to come back before the governing body with a paper specifically about that. So this will get a very fast response back to us on that, along that line. Plus, it explains that quite a lot of these ones will get an automatic rate relief because of the sudden devaluation of their properties, which will A, solve the problem of the amount of money they're going to be with rates, but B, probably piss them off because their property is not worth as much as they thought. And it's trying to clarify that and then come back to what we can do then as a governing body. I think everyone does want this to act promptly, but again, without being rushing into things that we haven't fully understood, which is what's behind that. I think the Deputy Mayor is desperate to really add to my explanation, so I'll let her do that.
Very good explanation, thank you, Your Worship. But just to add to that, yes, the rates don't go out to August, so we will still have a chance to discuss it before they go out. You make a very good point. This is really trying to say we are looking, we're going to help you, absolutely. But there are a whole lot of other things in the background that I know that Finance and Matt are aware of that have to come into play as well. So we need to get all the facts rather than just knee-jerked. Because I was the same as you. Why don't we just do it? You know, that's what other councils have done. But there are all sorts of other things happening. So I think we just need to be sure that we've got all the different moving parts, and we'll have that information before any more rates notices go out, right? Because they don't go out till August.
And these guys are fixing the problems with the flood and preventing more flood, so it's not quite there. It's not in their bailiwick. But
good thinking, caring.
Yeah. Good stuff, and shows that we're all worried and concerned on behalf of our ratepayers. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. My question sort of has been asked in part by Richard and also with Greg, but thank you, gentlemen, for the work that you've undertaken on this. The concern that I've got is really about a community that is wanting certainty and not creating unrealistic expectations. I know that in my community, the local board have organised 2 public meetings next week, and it does concern me that those communities are coming wanting answers, and we're not going to be potentially at a point where we can provide all of the answers that they want. So how, gentlemen, are you planning to front public meetings and manage expectations with people who've been savagely hurt by the flooding experience?
Thanks, Councillor. I think it depends on which questions a homeowner is seeking answers to there. Our experience in Muriwai, I think the week before last now, was that actually things are happening so quickly that there was quite a lot that we could share about where the geotechnical works got to, that yes, we could reaffirm the timescales that we talked about previously about when that would be ready. We were able to, in flood affected areas, you know, we've communicated now and been able to say that those that have given us feedback, we'll get back to them in 6 weeks and begin the next stage of engagement in 6 weeks. And all of this information is happening and developing really quickly, week on week on week. So I think there are questions that we can answer, and whilst I would never say that we had all of the answers in Muriwai last week, I think going into these communities now, we are able, because things are moving so quickly, to give almost real-time updates that are helpful. Clearly, there are some questions that we can't yet answer, and there'll be some confidential conversation about buyouts and such like a bit later on. But there are some things that we can talk to because things are moving so quickly.
I'm heartened to hear that, but I just want to reiterate the importance of managing expectations for communities that have been severely impacted. And while it's lovely to have a lot of information, most people now, in terms of just trying to cope, are wanting final answers. So it's just how you front those, how you manage those, and that these matters don't be politicised.
Noted.
I think he's doing it with care. I mean, we've got to let these guys do their work and not agony aunt over the whole thing. I mean, it's tricky. And I think some more of that will come out of later in the day about that voluntary buyback. There are levels of expectation which are heroic compared to what's going to happen. We've got to manage that together, and these guys are doing a pretty good job in my view. Okay, I've got Watson and Walker's got one small little one to go, and then we'll have a break for passing water as well. I mean, managing.
A question prompted by the comments on trying to seek out more information about uninsured people. It's probably strictly not your brief, but certainly one that goes to this, notion of supporting and helping and preparing people. Obviously, insurance premiums are going up. So I just got mine, unaffected area, it's gone up 46%. Sure. Now, I don't know what and that's a significant cost. Not quite up to council rates, but starting to move that way in some instances. Have you any sense of what's happening to people in the areas or individuals who have been hit a number of times? Because I'm assuming that if mine's going up 46% as a normal person, then people who have got multiple claims in are going up exponentially more. And at some point, and I would suggest that point's already here, where people aren't going to be able to afford to insure themselves. And that problem, therefore, is going to get bigger, particularly in cases of those ones where we're maybe not directly involved with, but they've been able to get things fixed up because they've been insured. Do you see that as an issue? And B, do you have any info on how that potentially is affecting people, going forward?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor. I see it as an issue on a personal level, obviously, as do you. I can't tell you that I've got any statistics. If I'm being honest, that's not a conversation that people often have with me at the moment about their insurance premiums. The conversations we have are more about insurance for temporary housing running out, the rates conversation that we've just had, mortgage relief. So the recovery office has got the CEOs of the banks coming in to meet us next week to talk about what part the banks play in these problems that face us all. But no, but in all honesty, not too many conversations about.
Okay, yeah, thank you, and I appreciate the response. I guess what I'm signalling is that conceivably this is an emerging problem going forward that brings more people into the fold here, especially if these weather events continue. Thank you.
A good question. I think on the 28th of the day after the first of these serious ones, the first question I raised with the Prime Minister was this is going to be an issue for you to think about because it's going to be not just in Auckland, it's going to be right across the country. Even if you're in an area that's not affected, the nature of insurance is that it's kind of cooperative in a certain level, and we will all be paying in some ways for this, and that the government will have to be thinking about where they sit in this, and particularly for those people who are not insured, because there are some risks associated with that. You know, we can't end up with a situation where we've encouraged people to not be insured.
Sorry, what I should have said in my answer as well was as well as the banks, we do have a regular forum with the CEOs of the insurers. So let me ask if they can give some guidance on where they think things are going and why they think they're going there, and give you some feedback.
We asked them for a discount for 9 Fisherman's Cove.
Good luck with that. I mean, the second group that I spoke to after the Prime Minister was the Insurance Council. Councillor Walker.
Just got a question around project management and financial oversight. I mean, there have been instances where probably thousands of tonnes of soil are being shifted around the region, and some of that soil is going to landfills when it could be going to clean fills. Quite obviously, there are going to be probably millions of tonnes of soil moved in this exercise. So is your group giving some thought to the mechanics of how things are done, how they're done economically? Because there are areas of Auckland, for example, that would benefit from being uplifted to mitigate inundation. Obviously, if you're shifting houses, if the council has got locations where those houses can be shifted to, you save potentially many millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So are you giving some project management and financial thought to these things, and have you got people engaged around that? Because my observation and Ken Turner's observation is significant sums of money have been effectively wasted recently.
Through your chair, Councillor Walker, there has been consideration of that, but in that initial emergency, not a lot of consideration has been given to it. It's more about getting those roads open and things moved. One area in Councillor Turner's ward, of course, is the controlled area notice for Cody dieback, so those controlled spaces. But I know the infrastructure owners are very interested in ensuring they work together to look at those opportunities, because it is costing some of those infrastructure owners money in the way of handing that on and looking for opportunities for clean fill materials that can be reutilised as a real conversation and a real need.
Good question, good answer. I think in the short term there's a bit of a rush to clear roads, but in the long term we should be thinking about these things, and I'm sure Matt Tucker is doing that as an engineer. Okay, that brings me to the end of questions, and so you guys can be relieved, and we'll say if there's any further debate, otherwise I'm going to put the motion that we receive this. Okay. Okay, I've got Philip Heiner, Henderson.
One question of you,
One question, last question.
One question of you, Matt. There's a media release just gone out, and you're saying that today we're considering whether to progress the work, but we're not being asked to consider progressing the work. The work is progressing.
No, the work is progressing.
Is that media statement incorrect in that regard? You're probably not aware of it, but the wording, just lost it.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Will you have a look at that, please, Josh? Thanks for
the
raising
work
it.
is
No, the
progressing.
work is progressing.
The question before us today is not about whether we progress the work.
No, it's going flat out. We've funded the work. Thank you for that. If that's something gone out that's incorrect, that wouldn't surprise me. Okay, now, for debate, Filipina and then Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. And for me, it's not a debate. I just wanted to acknowledge, Matt, to you and to your staff. Firstly, thank you for the meeting we had in Māngere with a member of the local board at Māngere Otahu, who last night I attended the business meeting for the local board, advised them in regards to your memo dated the 13th of June. Also advised them that not only the local board but the community are going to be consulted and everything else. So their feedback from them to me to you is thank you. They look forward to working with you and your team. So I just really want to acknowledge the work since you took up the position. But then again, for us and across the region, is making sure that those that have been affected by these floods are actually looked after. And so I just, Chair, I just wanted to do that, just to say thank you. And that is the message from the Māngere Otahu local board from their business meeting last night. Kia ora. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think we all tautoko that one. Shane Henderson, please.
Thanks, Mayor. Just really briefly, just want to acknowledge the fortitude and the patience of the residents that have been affected by the floods and in flood communities. You know, people have been frustrated in some articles and on social media, etc. They've expressed it publicly, and I totally get that. I understand and really sympathise with that frustration. I've always said throughout this whole process that things are moving quickly, and we thank our staff for that and all the great work that they are doing, but we cannot, and actually central government cannot, move as quickly as residents actually need. That's a physical impossibility when you lose your home, and we have to do a bunch of things like policy work and some of the sort of less sexy stuff to figure out what actually we can do about this disaster. So, you know, just explaining for some why it has taken a bit of time. But yeah, just acknowledge people that are hanging tough, people that are still looking for houses now and trying to get their lives back together. Thank you, and we're working as fast as we can.
I think we all tautoko that one as well. I mean, we are proceeding methodically through a tricky patch, and fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Councillor Hill, who's neither of those things.
I never know how to start when there is a comment before. Kia ora, Chair, thank you. I just want to acknowledge the staff again. This is it is phenomenal work, and it is fast. It does not, as Councillor Henderson says, feels fast for those who have been without a home or without certainty. And that was part of my question is, you know, the Healthy Waters team and others have been doing a great amount of work when I've asked or others have asked to give those hard answers to people. But I think overall we do need to be careful or decide, is it us or is it a government or who is going to bring those really hard conversations forward for some of those people we kind of know that we will not be buying out or cannot be buying out. If it is thousands and thousands, well over 5,000 I think properties that were quite significantly affected, not offended, but we are working in the numbers of 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe, 500 homes that may be affected by this buyout scheme. So everyone who's been affected by a damaged home or flooded home probably feels like they're part of that 500 because every incident for every person has been drastic. But what we are saying and what we've been publicly saying is that it is largely around safety and risk of life first, and then it cascades down. So we just need to be careful in the next few months of how we can quickly get out those messages. And I know we're talking about it in confidential later, but I do constantly, and we fed back through our National Adaptation Plan submission to the government long before the floods, that we do need to make sure that the government is taking up a larger portion of this bill. I see that Hawke's Bay and others are saying that, they could be bankrupted. Don't know if that's accurate, but there are, comments of that coming from those smaller councils with saying that cost, they will not be able to bear that cost. But despite our size, we also will not be able to bear that cost. We're already looking at billions when you look at buyouts and infrastructure projects, but we will not be able to fund a 50-50 when we have a far smaller revenue base than the government does, and our debt to revenue ratio. The government does not have the same sort of debt controls and tools that we are forced to be stuck in as well. So although we need to drive this forward, we just need to be careful about how we have those conversations with government. I know you are, Mayor, and others. The other thing I just want to say is that this will be transformational for our city, and it is what the teams have already been doing, but where opportunities have come, so Northcote, Mangere, Roskill, when we've had the land, or the government's had the land, and we've been able to do this, we have been doing this work and getting great results, as we saw during the floods in some of those areas that did not flood were because of projects we had done. If you think of Quay Street, if you think of Hurstmere Road, if you think of Northcote Te Ara Awataha, these types of projects, coupled with all the work we're doing through Planning, Environment and Parks Committee, around overland flow paths, around potential plan changes, around a whole raft of things that will have to come together. These projects will be the things that people really grab onto and are excited about, but it also will mean those hard conversations that the teams have been having, where there may not be an infrastructure solution to what happened on the 27th for a lot of communities. A lot of people will think there is a way forward, but with the way our city has been built for a very, very long time, there may not be an option to deal with 300 mils of rain in 6 hours for every community. So it will be difficult. There will be fantastic successes through this, and I'm excited to see this be rolled out quicker than we could have imagined. But it's important to know that it may not have a successful outcome for every part of the city that was affected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've all understood that, and we're all in agreement. I'm going to put the motion now, please. All those in favour of noting the progress and asking the staff to just a bit more about where we can be on the finances of this. And we are underway, and thank you very much, Councillor Darby. There is a correction going out. I didn't know about the thing that had gone out, but it did suggest that we were debating whether we were going to get on with it, and we're going like mad. Okay. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, carried. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was excellent, and I think we all enjoyed it as much as we can enjoy discussing something which is quite difficult. I'm going to have a 5-minute break for making space for waters.